Day 9 of Browns training camp is over, and there were a few really good Shedeur Sanders balls, but I gotta say, it seems like, and I haven't seen a quarterback tracker, Deshaun Watson took advantage of not having the pads on, all right? So if you don't know, there was some inclement weather, so they had to close the Browns training camp to the fans, so I didn't get the exclusive footage I got to see, and then on top of that, none of the fans were there, and they were not in pads today. They were supposed to be in pads today. They are going to be pads tomorrow when Shedeur takes over for the ones. This was a good little levels concept he did.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
There's a player on the Cleveland Browns roster right now who is catching everything, running past everyone, and getting plugged into so many different roles that the coaching staff is basically treating him like a Swiss Army knife with cleats. Kick returns, punt returns, end arounds. Every single route concept Todd Monken can draw up on a whiteboard, and somehow almost nobody outside of the diehard Browns faithful is even mentioning his name. Meanwhile, the quarterback competition just took a turn that has the entire building buzzing. But here is the part that should genuinely frustrate you. What you saw on your timeline today and what actually happened on that practice field are two very different stories. One quarterback threw 7 touchdowns in a single session and barely got half of them documented on camera. Another quarterback threw 1 interception on a tipped ball, and it got plastered across every single beat writer feed from 4 different angles like it was the Zapruder film. Something is off with how this camp is being covered. And today, we are going to break down every single detail you did not get from the mainstream feeds. The real stats, the real context, the real winner of today's practice who is not either quarterback. And a coverage pattern that honestly every single Browns fan deserves to know about. Drop a football emoji in the comments right now if you have been sleeping on this Browns roster, because after today, that excuse officially expires.
They inside, they ain't got the pads on, so I think it's an interesting situation. This was a really good ball. It seemed like from what the reporters were reporting, this was a deep ball day. Dylan Gabriel was pushing the ball down the field. Oh, wait, they called PI on this. Hold on. Y'all better give my guy Shedeur his 15 yards. He threw into a pass interference, but this is Malachi Corley. This is a deep ball. He puts this at a pretty good spot. He gives him a chance away from the defenders. That's some really good football play from a very deep ball. As you see, Malachi Corley is able to turn and protect himself, protect the ball from the defender. You got to come up. Hey, we've seen Jerry Jeudy hand that to a defender.
If you have been following this Browns training camp through scattered clips and hot takes on social media, there is a very real chance the picture in your head right now does not match what has actually been happening on that practice field. And that is not your fault. That is a coverage problem. So let me give you the full, unfiltered numbers and let you decide for yourself what story they actually tell. Across the entirety of training camp entering today, Shedeur Sanders sat at 104 completions on 148 attempts, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Read those numbers again because they matter. That is a completion percentage hovering around 70% across a full camp's worth of work. Not one practice, not one hot stretch. The entire camp. 8 touchdowns against just 2 picks across that same span. For a rookie quarterback learning a brand new NFL system with brand new teammates and brand new timing on every single throw, those numbers tell you something real about his processing speed and his ability to operate within structure. Now here is where it gets interesting. Deshaun Watson entering today sat at 93 completions on 146 attempts, 10 touchdowns, but 6 interceptions, dragging that efficiency number down into uncomfortable territory. The raw touchdown count is higher than Shedeur's. That is true. But when you factor in that the interception total is literally 3 times higher, the overall picture starts to look a lot less dominant than the highlight clips would suggest. Dylan Gabriel has been sitting at 48 of 71 with 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in his more limited reps. And Tylen Green, in a very small sample, has been a quiet 17 of 21, which is efficient but hard to draw major conclusions from given the snap count. Now today specifically, Shedeur went 11 of 16 with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Watson reportedly went off for 7 touchdowns in what multiple people described as his best single practice of the entire offseason. Dillon Gabriel was sharp in his limited window, going 4 of 6 with 2 scores. Here is what I need you to understand, and this is exactly why Gridiron Ground exists. These numbers do not lie, but they also do not tell the whole story by themselves. Context is everything, and the context surrounding today's practice is where things get genuinely fascinating, and honestly a little bit uncomfortable depending on.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
How much you trust the people filtering this information to you in real time. If you are watching this channel for the first time, this is what we do here. We do not give you the surface level recap. We dig into the layers underneath it. And if that is the kind of coverage you have been looking for, go ahead and subscribe right now, because what I am about to walk you through over the next several minutes is not something you are going to find broken down this thoroughly anywhere else. The cumulative camp numbers paint a picture of a rookie quarterback who has been remarkably consistent and a veteran quarterback who has been volatile. Today was an outlier in the best possible way for Watson, but one outlier does not rewrite the entire data set. And that distinction between a single great day and a sustained great stretch is going to matter enormously as this competition moves toward its next phase. The question is not whether Watson can have a good day. He proved today that he can. The question is whether he can stack good days back to back to back the way Shedeur has been doing since the first week of this camp. That is the bar, and today was step 1 of clearing it. But before we even get deeper into the quarterback conversation, something else happened on that field today that I think is actually the bigger story. And it involves a name that should be on every single Browns fan's radar heading into the preseason. Let me say this clearly before I go any further, because I never want to be the guy who twists a good performance into something negative just to fit a narrative. Deshaun Watson had a genuinely good practice today, not a good stretch. Not a decent quarter of work. A full practice that multiple people on the ground described as his best showing of the entire offseason. 7 touchdowns in a single session is a real number. That commands respect regardless of the circumstances surrounding it. And I want to sit in that for a moment because fairness matters here. If I am going to spend time on this channel questioning Watson's consistency across the rest of this camp, I have to be equally willing to acknowledge when the man shows up and performs at a high level. Today was that day. Full stop. No spin. No asterisk in bold letters. Credit where credit is earned. Now, here is where my job gets a little more nuanced, because giving you credit and giving you context are not mutually exclusive things. They actually go hand in hand when you are trying to evaluate a quarterback competition honestly. A significant chunk of today's practice work centered around the red zone. That is important framing because red zone work naturally compresses the field, shrinks the windows, and changes the types of throws that are available. A lot of the highest percentage red zone concepts in any NFL playbook are designed touchdowns. Drag routes that cross the formation underneath with natural picks built into the spacing. Slant routes breaking into vacated zones against specific defensive looks. Quick hitters to the flat where the receiver just needs to beat one man to the pylon. These are not difficult throws in the traditional sense. They are execution plays where the quarterback needs to get the ball out on time to the right spot, and the design of the play does most of the heavy lifting from there. By multiple reports, several of Watson's 7 touchdowns today fell into exactly that category. One specific score to Jerry Jeudy got described as essentially a gimme based on how the defense was aligned pre-snap. The route was open before Watson even started his drop. That does not mean the touchdown does not count. It absolutely does. But it does mean that when you see the number 7 on your timeline, the mental image your brain creates of 7 contested, tight window, elite arm talent scoring strikes is probably not the most accurate version of what actually happened. Some of those scores were legitimately impressive. Reports described at least 2 throws that required real anticipation and genuine accuracy into spots where the defense was competing. Those are the reps that matter most when you are evaluating whether a quarterback is actually performing at a high level versus simply being in the right place at the right time inside a well-designed scheme. The real question coming out of today is not whether Watson can produce numbers in a favorable red zone practice script. It is whether this version of Watson, the decisive version, the one pulling the trigger without hesitation, carries forward into tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. Because the track record across this camp tells a very specific story. Watson has been inconsistent. He has had stretches where he could not crack 50% completions. He has had days where the interceptions piled up in ways that raised legitimate concerns about his processing speed. Today looked different. Today felt different based on every account coming out of that building. But different for one day and different going forward are 2 entirely separate things. And the next several practices will tell us which version of that story we are actually living inside. What they will not tell us, at least not fairly, is how today's practice actually compared to what Shedeur did on the same field in the same conditions. And the reason for that has nothing to do with the football itself. It has to do with something much more uncomfortable. This is the part of today's update that honestly frustrated me more than anything that happened between the lines. And I want to walk you through it carefully, because I think this is a conversation every single person following this team needs to be having. Not just about the Browns, but about how we consume NFL information in general. When Shedeur Sanders threw his 1 interception today, a tipped ball at the line that got picked off after a defender got a hand on it, that play showed up across multiple beat writer feeds within minutes. Not once, not from one angle, from multiple reporters capturing it from multiple vantage points, replaying it, analyzing it, making sure absolutely nobody scrolling through their timeline could possibly miss the fact that the rookie quarterback had thrown an interception. Sit with that visual for a moment. 1 tipped ball, multiple angles, multiple accounts, maximum amplification. Now flip it around. Deshaun Watson threw 7 touchdowns in the same practice. By the end of the day, only 3 or maybe 4 of those scores had actually been captured and posted by these same reporters on these same feeds. 3 or 4 out of 7. If you were following along in real time the way I was, refreshing constantly, reading every update, clicking every clip, your best guess for Watson's touchdown total based solely on what got documented would have been somewhere around 3 to 5. It was not until later that the real number got confirmed. And that gap between what was shown and what actually happened is not a minor detail you can wave away. There was reportedly a stretch of roughly 40 minutes during today's practice where beat writer feeds went almost completely silent. No updates, no clips, nothing. Maybe that was a drill period that does not translate well to short video format. Maybe some of it really is just about where a given reporter happened to be standing relative to which quarterback at any given moment. Those are legitimate explanations, and I am not going to pretend they are not. But here is why I keep coming back to this theme on Gridiron Ground, and why I think you need to hear it laid out plainly. The pattern is not isolated to one day. Across this entire camp, we have watched Shedeur's mistakes get amplified and his positive reps get quietly buried while Watson's rough days get softened and his good days get celebrated, sometimes within the same news cycle. That is not balanced coverage. That is editorial framing. And whether it is conscious or unconscious, coordinated or coincidental, it shapes how every single fan watching from home perceives this quarterback competition in ways that have nothing to do with what is actually happening.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
On the field. I also noticed something specific today that I think deserves to be flagged transparently. There is a particular reporter who has been noticeably quieter than usual across much of this camp when it comes to posting live clips and updates. Today, on the day, Watson had his best practice. That same reporter's posting frequency picked up noticeably with a sharper focus on Watson's positive plays. I'm not assigning a grand conspiracy to that. Coverage habits shift day to day for all kinds of normal reasons. But when you are tracking this information as closely as I have been across every single day of this camp, patterns like that become hard to ignore. And I would rather flag it honestly for you than pretend I did not see it. This is exactly why this channel exists. If you are watching Gridiron Ground right now, you are here because you want the full picture, not a curated highlight reel designed to push you toward a conclusion somebody else already decided you should reach. Subscribe right now if that is the kind of coverage you value, because we are going to keep doing this all the way through the preseason and into the regular season. Every practice, every number, every angle they do not want to show you. Now let me get back to the actual football, because there is a story building on this roster right now that has nothing to do with the quarterback battle, and honestly might end up mattering just as much when the real games start. Here is the part of today's practice that got almost completely buried underneath the interception discourse and the Watson touchdown celebration. Shedeur Sanders went 11 of 16. He threw 2 touchdowns. He operated the offense with the kind of rhythm and command that has defined his entire body of work across this camp. And he did all of that in a session that leaned heavily into red zone work, where the windows are tighter, the margins are thinner, and the degree of difficulty on every single throw goes up compared to normal field work. 11 of 16 is a completion rate north of 68% in a red zone heavy practice, against a defense that by all accounts was competing at full speed and not exactly rolling out the welcome mat. That is not a bad day. That is a genuinely productive day from a rookie quarterback still learning a brand new system in his first NFL training camp. But let us talk about the interception, because everybody else already has, and I think it deserves a more honest breakdown than it has gotten so far. The play, as described by people who actually watched it unfold in real time, was a tipped ball. Shedeur tried to fit a throw into a tight window. A defender at the line got a hand on it, redirected it, and it ended up intercepted. That is it. That is the entire play, not a misread, not a panic throw into triple coverage, not a decision-making breakdown that reveals some fundamental flaw in his processing. A tipped ball, the kind of play that happens to every quarterback at every level of football multiple times across a full season. Here is my honest perspective on interceptions like this one in a training camp setting. And I want to be completely clear that this applies universally, not just to Shedeur. If a quarterback is out here throwing 1 interception in an otherwise efficient practice because he tried to make an aggressive throw into a tight window, that is development. That is a young player pushing the boundaries of what he can get away with in a controlled environment where the consequences of a mistake are essentially zero. You want your rookie quarterback testing those limits in July and August. You want him finding out where the line is between aggressive and reckless, so that when September arrives and the games actually count, he has a clearer internal map of which throws are worth the risk and which ones are not. If Shedeur was throwing 4 or 5 interceptions in a single practice with no sign of self-correction, that would be a different conversation entirely. I would be the first person on this channel telling you there is a legitimate concern worth monitoring. But one tipped ball in a practice where he completed over 2/3 of his passes and threw 2 touchdowns is not a red flag. It is norms. And the amount of energy that went into amplifying that noise today relative to everything else he did well tells you a lot more about the people doing the amplifying than it does about the quarterback who threw the pass. There was also a moment on film today where Shedeur took off and ran, showing real functional speed in the open field. This keeps showing up practice after practice, and it keeps contradicting the narrative that has followed him since the pre-draft process that he is a statue in the pocket with no ability to create outside of structure. Every time it shows up on tape, it matters, because mobility in this league is not just about design quarterback runs. It is about extending plays, buying time for routes to develop, and keeping a defense honest with the threat that the quarterback might tuck it and go if the pocket breaks down. Shedeur has that gear. He has shown it repeatedly. And the fact that a segment of the evaluation community still refuses to acknowledge it says more about the rigidity of their scouting framework than it does about the actual player. One more detail worth noting from the quarterback play today that has nothing to do with stats or touchdowns or interceptions. Both Shedeur and Watson were reportedly showing improved cadence work at the line of scrimmage, drawing the defense offside more frequently, operating with a cleaner pre-snap rhythm. That is the kind of incremental, unsexy, foundational improvement that never makes a highlight clip, but absolutely shows up on Sundays when the difference between a free play and a drive-killing penalty can swing an entire game. And yet, somehow, the most encouraging detail from both quarterbacks today got almost no attention compared to a single tipped ball and a touchdown number that needed context. That is the world we are operating in right now, and it makes what is coming next even more important to understand. Forget the quarterback battle for a moment. Forget the media coverage debate. If I had to name one single player who won today's practice more convincingly than anyone else on that field, the answer is Denzel Boston. And honestly, it is not even particularly close. This man was catching everything. By multiple counts, he was directly involved in at least 4 touchdowns during today's session, whether as the primary target hauling in the score or as a decoy whose presence en route pulled coverage away from somebody else and created the opening. 4 touchdowns worth of impact in a single practice from a player who is still in the earliest stages of his NFL career. That alone would be enough to get your attention. But what makes the Boston story genuinely special is not just the production. It is the variety of ways this coaching staff is finding to deploy him. End arounds, special teams reps, legitimate buzz building around.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Using him as a punt returner and a kick returner. And on top of all of that, every standard route concept this offense can throw at him, from deep shots down the sideline to intermediate crossers to short area catch and run opportunities in traffic. Think about what that actually tells you about how this coaching staff views him. When a team starts plugging one specific player into that many different roles this early in a camp, that is not a coincidence, and it is not experimentation for the sake of experimentation. That is a coaching staff that has identified a legitimate weapon and is now actively working to figure out every possible way to maximize his presence on the field. Every additional role is another set of snaps. Every additional set of snaps is another opportunity to make a play. And every additional opportunity to make a play is another chance to force the coaching staff's hand when it comes time to finalize this roster and set the depth chart. The size element keeps coming up in every report, and it deserves its own spotlight for a moment. Boston is reportedly just too big for a lot of the defensive backs trying to cover him. That is not a subtle advantage. That is a foundational physical trait that creates problems regardless of scheme, regardless of coverage shell, regardless of which quarterback is delivering him the football. When you are physically bigger than the man assigned to stop you, the margin for error on your routes shrinks dramatically, because even imperfect throws become catchable when you can use your frame to box out the defender and go up and get it. And the most encouraging part of this entire trend is that Boston is not just producing against the second unit. Reports consistently describe him performing at a high level against the starting defense as well. When a young receiver is beating both the ones and the twos with the same level of consistency, that tells you the traits are translatable. It is not a product of going against lesser competition in a favorable practice script. The skills are real. The production is real. And the trajectory from OTAs through minicamp through training camp has been pointing in one direction the entire time, straight up. Multiple observers who have been tracking this roster across the entire offseason have already flagged Boston as one of the single biggest risers on the team. Today did not just confirm that assessment. It put an exclamation point on it loud enough that even the people who have not been paying attention should be hearing it by now. And what makes this rise even more significant is the system he is rising inside of. Because Todd Monken's offense is not a random collection of plays. It is a specifically designed machine built to exploit exactly the kind of traits Boston brings to the table. Everything we have documented across this camp about how Todd Monken wants to run this offense points toward one central philosophy: create advantageous matchups before the ball is ever snapped, and then attack those matchups with precision once the play begins. Motion, pre-snap shifts, drag concepts designed to generate natural picks and rubs at the second level, crossing routes that force defenders into trail position where they are always a half step behind the receiver. And underneath all of that, an emphasis on getting playmakers the ball in space where their individual talent can take over after the catch. Now picture a receiver like Denzel Boston operating inside that specific system. A receiver with legitimate size who can also separate cleanly off the line and win at the top of his route. A receiver who is reportedly performing well against every coverage type he has faced this camp. A receiver who is now getting reps on end arounds, on special teams, on returns, on everything. Inside Monken's scheme, a player like that becomes something close to a cheat code, because the defense is forced into a series of impossible trade-offs every single time he is on the field. If you put a smaller, quicker corner on him, Boston can use his frame to box the defender out on contested catches and win at the catch point in a way that a smaller receiver simply cannot. If you counter by putting a bigger, more physical safety on him to match his size, you are now asking that safety to keep up with a receiver who has shown the ability to separate on intermediate and short routes, where quickness off the line matters more than straight line speed. Either matchup creates a problem. An offensive coordinator builds entire game plans around players who create unsolvable problems. The end-around usage is particularly interesting because it tells you Monken sees Boston as more than just a traditional route runner. End-arounds are plays designed for players who can handle the ball in their hands in open space, players who have the vision and the burst to turn a simple, jet sweep handoff into a chunk play. When you start adding that element to a receiver who is already producing in the passing game, you create an additional layer of complexity for opposing defensive coordinators who now have to account for Boston in ways that go beyond just bracketing him in coverage. The special teams buzz adds yet another dimension. Punt returns and kick returns are high-value touches. Every time a player gets the ball in his hands on a return, he has a chance to flip field position or even score without the offense running a single play. A receiver with Boston's size handling those duties is unusual, and it creates a unique challenge for coverage units that are typically designed to tackle smaller, shiftier return specialists, not a player built like a boundary receiver with real speed. Todd Monken was also reportedly vocal today about correcting his wide receivers during 2-minute drill work, specifically about alignment issues and lining up correctly. That detail matters in this context because it tells you the coaching staff is holding the entire receiver group to a high standard even on a day where the overall production was encouraging. Boston is rising within a system that demands precision. The fact that he keeps producing despite that demanding standard tells you the development is genuine and not a product of a coaching staff letting things slide. And here is where the long-term projection starts to get really exciting if you are a Browns fan paying attention. We are still in training camp. The preseason games have not even started yet. Joint practices against the Bills are still on the horizon. If Boston is already producing at this level, already earning this much role diversity, already generating this much buzz across multiple independent sources covering this camp, what does his trajectory look like once real game film starts getting produced? Once defensive coordinators across the league have to start game planning for a receiver they might not have had on their radar entering the offseason. The ceiling on this player, based on everything we have tracked across this entire camp, is legitimately exciting. And the floor, even if you want to pump the brakes and apply the most conservative projection possible, still looks like a player who is going to contribute meaningfully across multiple phases of this team's game plan in year one. That is rare for any young receiver. And it is a credit to both Boston himself and to a coaching staff that has clearly identified what they have and is working aggressively to maximize it. Now let me bring this whole thing back together and talk about what needs to happen over the next stretch of this camp for all of these storylines to reach their next turning point. Here is where I need to be completely honest with you, because I think this is the most important framing of this entire quarterback competition heading forward. And it is the framing that a lot of people covering this team are either unwilling or unable to give you straight. Deshaun Watson had one great practice. One, after a camp full of uneven performances, inconsistent accuracy, and an interception total that was piling up at a rate that should concern anyone evaluating quarterback play objectively. Today was a spike, a positive spike, a genuinely encouraging spike. But a spike is not a trend, and trends are what win quarterback competitions. Not individual data points, no matter how impressive those individual data points might look in isolation. The standard Watson needs to clear from here is not just having another good day. It is having a good week, then a good joint practice against a real opposing defense, then a good preseason game where the lights are on and the hits are real, and the consequences of a bad decision are actual points on the scoreboard for the other team. That is the bar. And it is the bar because everything we have tracked across this entire camp tells us that Watson's issue has never been ability. It has been consistency. The arm talent is there. It has always been there. Nobody is questioning whether Deshaun Watson is physically capable of making NFL throws. The question is whether the version of him that showed up today is the real version, or whether it is an outlier sitting inside a much larger pattern of volatility that has defined his time in Cleveland. Meanwhile, look at what Shedeur Sanders has done across this same stretch of camp. Over 100 completions on 148 attempts, with a completion rate hovering near 70%. 8 touchdowns against just 2 interceptions across the entire body of work. Consistent command of the offense practice after practice. Improved cadence at the line. Mobility showing up on tape repeatedly. A connection with his receivers that appears to be deepening with every passing day. That is not a spike. That is a trend. That is a sustained, documented, multi-week trend of a rookie quarterback operating at a level that should make everyone in that building take notice regardless of where he was drafted or what his last name happens to be. If you are just finding Gridiron Ground for the first time, let me tell you exactly what this channel is about. We do not root for narratives. We do not cherry-pick clips to push a predetermined conclusion. We follow the evidence wherever it leads, practice by practice, day by day, and we tell you what we see honestly even when it is uncomfortable, even when it goes against the mainstream framing, even when it means giving credit to a guy on his best day, while simultaneously pointing out that one great day does not erase weeks of concerning tape. That is the standard we hold ourselves to. And if that resonates with you, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because the most critical stretch of this camp is about to start, and the coverage you get here is not going to look like what you find anywhere else. The joint practices against the Bills are coming. Those sessions are going to be the closest thing to real game conditions either quarterback has faced since this competition began. And the way each man performs in those sessions, against an unfamiliar defense with unfamiliar looks and unfamiliar pass rushers, is going to tell us more about this competition than the entire previous stretch of camp combined. Watson needs to bring today's version of himself into that building, not last Thursday's version, not the version that was throwing picks into coverage on basic intermediate concepts. Today's version, the decisive, aggressive, accurate version. If that guy shows up against the Bills, this competition genuinely tightens. If the inconsistency returns, this thing is closer to settled than a lot of people want to admit. And underneath all of it, quietly stacking dominant practice after dominant practice, is Denzel Boston, the real winner of this offseason so far. The next 7 to 10 days of this Cleveland Browns training camp are going to tell us more about the direction of this franchise than anything that has happened so far. And I mean that in the most literal possible sense. Preseason games are on the horizon. The joint practices against the Buffalo Bills are approaching, and every single one of the storylines we have tracked across this entire camp, the quarterback competition, the Denzel Boston emergence, the coaching staff system installation, the media coverage patterns, all of it is about to get pressure tested in environments that are fundamentally different from the controlled intra-squad work we have been analyzing up to this point. For the quarterback battle specifically, the preseason games represent a threshold moment. Training camp stats matter, practice performance matters, but there is a level of evaluation that can only happen when a quarterback is operating under game conditions with real consequences attached to every decision. The speed of the pass rush changes. The complexity of the defensive disguises changes. The crowd noise, the adrenaline, the weight of knowing that a mistake leads to actual points on the actual scoreboard. All of that creates a different operating environment than even the most competitive training camp practice can simulate. Shedeur Sanders has never taken a regular speed NFL snap in a game setting. Everything we have seen from him so far, as impressive and as consistent as it has been, exists inside the controlled ecosystem of practice. The preseason will be the first time we get to see how his processing speed, his pocket presence, his cadence work, and his connection with these receivers translates when the variables get cranked up to real game levels. If the same composure and command he has shown in camp carries over into preseason action, that is a massive data point in his favor. If there is a drop-off, the Watson camp will have ammunition they currently do not have. For Watson, the preseason represents something slightly different. It is not about whether he can perform in a game setting. We already know he has done that at various points in his career. It is about whether the version of himself that showed up in today's practice, the sharp, decisive, 7-touchdown version, is the version that shows up under the lights. His track record in Cleveland has been defined by flashes of high-end ability surrounded by stretches of concerning inconsistency. Preseason games will either reinforce that pattern or break it, and breaking it is the only outcome that keeps this competition alive in any meaningful sense. The joint practices against the Bills add another critical layer because those sessions bring an unfamiliar defensive scheme into the equation. Everything both quarterbacks have faced so far has been against their own defense. The same coverages, the same pass rush looks, the same personnel groupings day after day. When an outside defense comes in with completely different tendencies, different blitz packages, and different coverage disguises, that forces the quarterback to diagnose and react to things he has not seen repeatedly in practice. That is where real processing ability gets exposed or confirmed. Casey Compson was also spotted working through individual drills again today, which is a development worth monitoring quietly as this camp progresses. His connection with Shedeur across the earlier portions of this offseason was well documented, and getting him back into the mix adds another variable to an already crowded receiver room that Denzel Boston is currently dominating. The Bills' joint practices also represent a critical opportunity for Boston himself. Going against a Buffalo secondary that is constructed differently than what he has faced in intra-squad work will tell us whether his size advantage and route running ability translate against defenders who are not already familiar with his tendencies. If he produces at the same level against an outside defense that he has produced against his own team's secondary, the argument for him as a legitimate year one contributor becomes almost impossible to ignore. Watch closely over the next stretch of this camp. Watch the quarterback numbers. Watch the consistency. Watch which receivers keep rising and which ones fade. And most importantly, watch how it gets covered. Because as we documented today, what shows up on your timeline and what actually happens on that field are not always the same thing. Here is the truth about today and about this entire Browns training camp so far. The real story is not one interception on a tipped ball. The real story is not 7 touchdowns in a red zone heavy practice. The real story is not even the quarterback competition itself, as fascinating and as consequential as that competition is going to be over the next several weeks. The real story is that this Cleveland Browns roster is deeper and more interesting than the mainstream coverage is giving it credit for. A rookie quarterback is performing with a consistency that should demand serious attention. A veteran quarterback had his best day of the offseason and now faces the challenge of proving it was not a one-time thing. And a young receiver named Denzel Boston is quietly building a case to be one of the most impactful offensive weapons this team has when the real games begin. The next stretch of this camp is going to separate the real contenders from the pretenders at every position. Joint practices, preseason games, and live evaluation under real conditions will give us answers that training camp practices simply cannot provide on their own. If this breakdown gave you something you did not get from scrolling through scattered clips and incomplete updates on your own, do me a favor right now. Subscribe to Gridiron Ground. Hit that notification bell. Drop your prediction for who wins this quarterback job in the comments below, and tell me whether you think Denzel Boston makes this roster as a day one starter. We are covering every single practice, every single development, and every single story this team produces from now through the regular season. No filter, no bias, just the full picture every single time. This is Gridiron Ground, and we are just getting started.
There's just no way around it. I wish I was a hater enough to hate on this, but this is a good ball, man. This is a good ball, right? So when you're seeing good ball, I like it. And I said this in my other video where Deshaun didn't do good yesterday. I would love for Deshaun to do great, because the best possible scenario for Shedeur, honestly, is Deshaun to go out there playing good football, and he uses his legs, he gets beat up, it's his last year, and he learns how good this offensive line is, and then maybe when it's time for Shedeur, he can come in, offensive line is gelled up, right, and he can kind of take the show and do what he needs to do, right? So idealistically, I think it makes sense, if Deshaun actually plays good. The problem is